HDFC board has approved the sale of 10% stake in HDFC Life via the IPO. And joining us right here on India Tonight this evening is none other than Mr. Keki Mistry. We really appreciate you taking time out this evening, Mr. Mistry, and being with us. What are the details that you'd like to share with us at this stage? It's a 10% stake sale via IPO. By when are we looking at a listing, and how much will be finally offloaded?
See, from the beginning, from several years, we've always told the market that we are looking at listing the life company. And as the first step towards listing, we need an in-principle approval from our board to do a 10% sale of shares. And that's the in-principle approval that we've taken from the board at this point of time. Valuation, bankers, all that will come later on. My sense is that the IPO will happen sometime. Our plan at least is to do it in the latter part of 2016. That's this calendar year. Obviously subject to SEBI approval and subject to IRD approval. So these two approvals are obviously necessary. But post that, we would look at doing an IPO.
I understand it's too early for you to talk about a timeline. The market was hoping that this IPO will happen sometime around mid-2016. Will it be fair to assume that it's unlikely to happen so soon? Because like you yourself pointed out, you need to now go through the process of appointing bankers, ascertaining value. How much of time could all of this take?
It's very difficult to put a timeline to these things because a lot of this is subject to regulatory approval. And being probably the first IPO for a life insurance company, I'm sure the insurance regulator and SEBI would take a certain amount of time to look at the document minutely. So I can't give you a timeline. I don't know. But we will quickly start the process as soon as possible. And my sense is the latter part of the calendar year is when we could look at the issue, when we could actually do the issue.
Mr. Mistry, I know again it's too early for you to talk about valuation as well, but the street believes that a 10% stake would be valued at anywhere between 2,000 odd crores. Is that a fair assessment according to you? There is a benchmark now with the sale, with increased investment that Standard Life increases its exposure to HDFC as well, HDFC Life as well. So is 2,000 crores a fair valuation? Would you say? I
don't want to get into valuation because obviously we have to talk to bankers before we talk about valuation. But if it was a 20,000 valuation, as you put it, I would be extremely disappointed. Let's put it that way.
So you obviously expect a much higher number and not just 20,000 crore rupees. I just wanted to understand, Standard Life, of course.
Obviously, I can't talk of valuation unless and until we've actually gone and appointed bankers and got a sense of valuation.
I have a fair sense of what your valuations could be, considering your very, very disappointed statement on 20,000 crore has raised your eyebrows. But I have a quick question to ask of you there, sir. Standard Life right now has a 35% stake in HDFC Life. Will we see some amount of that stake being sold as well, or is it only going to be HDFC that's going to sell the 10% stake?
As we speak now, the sense is that it is only HDFC that is going to do the initial listing. SEBI requires a 25% listing in the market. So this would be the first step towards achieving that 25%. But a 25%, as I understand it, has to be achieved over a period of 3 years. So we have, after the first issue is over, we have another 2 years or another 3 years to list a balance and get the full 25% on board.
Mr. Mistry, one more question from my end, which is, and you spoke about it as well, that this is going to be the first insurance IPO that we're going to see. Unlikely that we're unlikely to see even a public, insurance IPO happen before before HDFC Life. So in a sense, it is going to be, you will set a benchmark. And even in terms of regulatory approvals, like you yourself said, you will need, of course, a SEBI approval, but also you might need to take an IRD approval. Help us understand what are the regulatory hurdles that need to be crossed for this IPO to go through?
Basically, it's just these two. Obviously, any IPO requires an offering document to be prepared. So the offering document will obviously get done once the bankers are in place. A lot of preliminary work we've been doing over a period of time. So in that sense, the company is reasonably ready in terms of preparation for an IPO. I say reasonably. Obviously, a lot remains to be done. Once we get the bankers in place and once we've completed the paperwork, we then go to IRD, get the IRD approval, and once the IRD approval is in place, we then have to go to SEBI like any IPO has to.
So you will obviously be following the approval process and you will be getting the requisite regulatory nods in place. But I just wanted to ask you a question on market conditions. I know nobody wants to speculate and nobody can really time the markets. But is this a good time to go for a public listing right now? Markets have been volatile. They're beginning to gather some pace now.
See, my personal view on the markets, and obviously this is very subjective and can change over time. But as I see it, India looks very, very well positioned from all macro indicators that we are getting. We are beginning to see some degree of traction amongst the markets in terms of people looking at investing. Earnings start improving, as my senses will happen as we move into 2016-17. I would be reasonably confident that by the time we look at an issue in probably the last quarter of calendar year 2016, a market should look reasonably good, unless there is some global event, which obviously no one can predict.
Last question really, and to take that point forward, which is the kind of response that we've seen in the primary market to some of the issues. For instance, the Indigo IPO, which is a large issue, was very well received. We've seen some IPOs do well as well. You understand the financial markets well as well. Do you think the appetite is slowly coming back in the primary market as well in terms of response to these big ticket IPOs?
I think for a quality issue, the demand is very strong. For example, in our own case, since we have such a large foreign shareholding, we have been approached by so many of our investors, foreign as well as local, as well as large local institutions, saying that whenever we do the IPO, they would like to, be part of it and would like to see whether we can keep a small sort of allocation for them and stuff like that. So all that is a matter of detail. We will take a call on whether we should do that and when we should do that and pricing and stuff like that. But at this moment, as I said, it's only an in-principle approval from the board to look at doing an IPO in 2016.
So my last question before we let you go this Tuesday evening, fair to assume here that HDFC Life, despite its listing, will continue to be a subsidiary of HDFC Ltd going forward?
Certainly, after the first 10% issue is over, it will continue to remain a subsidiary of HDFC. After the full 25% is done, at that stage it is difficult to say. But today, based on the 10% listing that will happen, it will continue to remain a subsidiary.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.